Jesus heals 10 lepers, and exactly one says thank you. This text is often an appointed reading on Thanksgiving Day. I think every pastor has probably preached on this passage multiple times on Thanksgiving Day. And certainly there is a theme here of the importance of offering thanksgiving. But more to the point, there's a deeper levels of meaning here going on about how we give thanks and who we give thanks to, among other things. So, like with any biblical text, there are layers upon layers of meaning. So, let's delve into this one a little bit. First of all, the context, very important that to understand this story, that we know a little bit about leprosy, what it did, and what effect it had. If you saw the Chosen episode, and I hope you did, where Jesus heals the leper, you saw the really fine acting when the leper appeared on the scene. The combination of panic, fear, and potential aggression. Remember, the disciples are ready to looked like they were literally ready to kill that guy when he approached them. And that would have been a common reaction. If a leper got too close to you, you would kill that leper. I don't know if everybody would, but that would be a justifiable act of homicide in that case. And the reason for this, the reason leprosy was such a difficult thing to deal with, it was a communicable disease, and everybody knew this. It was contagious. It was something you could catch from somebody else. But the effect of it, well, precisely because of that, because of its contagious nature, if you contracted this disease, that was it for your social identity. You no longer were allowed to associate with family. Your closest bonds are severed. You are not able to carry on regular work, certainly. Just a horrible existence where you end up essentially exiled through no fault of your own. And in most cases, you just wake up one morning, you got this terrible disease. You're required by law to go to the priest. If the priest, who, what has the priest got to do with this? Well, the priest is the one who's kind of in charge of determining the worthiness of people to function not just at the temple in religious matters, but in every matter. And so the priest would diagnose people with moral conditions and excommunicate them if need be, but also physical ailments like leprosy was subject to the jurisdiction of the priest. So, what actually is the disease? It's a skin disease where your body parts are withered away. They fall off. You can see pictures that maybe don't, like, do a Google image search and you got people with noses falling off and ears falling off and just horrible stuff where your body is literally breaking down, and that physical component again is only part of the torture of having this disease, the social component as well. Though I suppose if there is a silver lining for some of these lepers, it's that they found a community in the leper colony. And so, uh, yeah, when you got leprosy, you hang out with other lepers, and nothing else matters. Yeah, any kind of other social or religious or any kind of status that would separate you from others is broken down by this common ailment, this common disease. And so this is why we have a Samaritan leper in with the Jewish lepers. We learned by now in our stories that Jews and Samaritans don't usually have anything to do with one another, but leprosy breaks down some of those social barriers. So anyway, our story begins with the lepers calling to Jesus for mercy. Perhaps they've heard that he heals lepers. They've certainly have heard of miracles, healing miracles that they have done. And they ask him for mercy. They desire to be restored to their previous lives before they had lepers. And they're being respectful here. They're at a distance. They're yelling out. They know they're not allowed to come close to Jesus. And Jesus tells them to go show themselves to the priests. This was the procedure if somebody by any means woke up one day and they were cured of leprosy, or they suspected they may be cured, well, again, it's the priest who signs off on this, right? The priest is the one who has the hard job of exiling, but the priest is also the one who can say, "Oh, you're good, you're clean now." So go show yourselves to the priest. As they went, they were cleansed. What's interesting about this? This is an act of faith. Jesus says, "Go show yourself to the priest." They have leprosy. They literally leave for Jerusalem. They're outside of Jerusalem. They've got a ways to go. They got a bit of a journey they've got to go on. They're between Samaria and Galilee. They're not close to Jerusalem. They're on the way, but they're a ways away. Jesus says, "Go show yourself to the priest in Jerusalem." They have to trust that this isn't going to be a fool's errand. They have to trust that they're going to that this is going to pay off for them somehow. And lo and behold, on the way to Jerusalem, they're cured. So what does this tell us? That sometimes Jesus heals people immediately. Sometimes there's an act of faith. Or is it that they're rewarded for their faith? No, it's that faith is the mechanism, the vehicle by which they are able to be cured. So for us as well, we believe we're going to be cured of everything. We're on the way to Jerusalem right now. We're on the way to the heavenly Jerusalem. And as we journey through this life in faith, we believe that when we get there, there's going to be a payoff for us, not because of anything we did, but because Jesus said, "Go, and you'll find when you get there, you're going to be clean." So I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit. This is usually the closing thoughts with the application, but we are on this journey. We are diseased as well, and we are not fit for the community of God. But Jesus says, "Go," and when you get there, you can trust that you'll be fit. And somewhere on the journey, they're cured of their leprosy, and somewhere before we reach the heavenly Jerusalem, when we shuffle off this mortal coil, is when our sin goes with us, and we are fit for the resurrection to come. So anyway, the disciples are at a distance here. They witness this. This will have a bit of a payoff for them years down the road as they also consider the journey that we are on. But the other thing to really notice here, so one comes and gives thanks to Jesus, the others don't. Why don't they? Is it because they're not thankful? Well, let me add a little extra level of nuance and complication to this story. I think the reason the Samaritan guy came back isn't because he's the only thankful leper. It's precisely because he's a Samaritan leper. See, the other ones are on the way to the priest. They're cured on the way. They want to give thanks to God. They can. How do they do so? By going to the temple. They actually, if you look in the Levitical law, they had a thing called thank offerings. I'd be surprised if these 9 lepers who went to Jerusalem didn't offer a thank offering. They're doing what Jesus told them to do. Jesus says, "Go see the priest." They're cured on the way. Why wouldn't they keep going, go see the priest, and offer a thanksgiving sacrifice at the temple where their ancestors have done for ages? Of course, the Samaritan dude, though, he's got a little bit of a bind. He actually is not allowed in the temple. He's a Samaritan. Even if he doesn't have leprosy, he's still a Samaritan. He's still got a contagion, if you will, and just by virtue of being a Samaritan. So he's thinking, how am I going to give thanks? So he just doubles back and says thank you to Jesus directly. At least that's my reading on it. I don't think the Samaritan is necessarily more virtuous than the others. But in a weird way, by virtue of him being a Samaritan, he's able to return and give thanks in a more privileged way. So if you bear with me here, you see the kind of the nuance here. What this story is actually revealing to us is that those who are lacking privilege, actually in the kingdom of God, end up with more privilege. This is the whole "blessed are the poor in spirit" kind of thing. So this is again something the disciples are seeing here, that they're seeing the Samaritan being accepted into the kingdom. And this pays off in the book of Acts when they literally go to Samaria and they make disciples there. And where do those Samaritans then go? Do they need to come to Jerusalem to worship the Lord? That's how it used to be. But now, as Jesus told the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem, but people who worship in spirit and truth. And so this is what the Samaritan leper is doing. He's worshiping in spirit and truth. He's giving thanks to Jesus. We are like lepers in that we have a contagion. We've been caught this disease of sin from our parents, and now we are apt to pass it on to others. We are not fit for God's kingdom in our sinful nature, and yet Jesus says, go see the priest. Who is the priest? Who's the priest we go and see? It is Jesus. He is our priest. He is our intercessor. He is our mediator. So we go and see him. He cleanses us. We go in faith. He cleanses us on the way. And then we return thanks to him. What does that thanksgiving look like for us? Well, at the risk of being overly predictable here and giving a pastor answer, it's going to church. See, this is where Jesus says he is to be found, where his people are gathered in his name, hearing his word, and receiving his body and blood in the sacrament. We seek Jesus where he is to be found. We also thank Jesus where he is to be found. But wait a minute, Pastor, I thought you said you could worship God in spirit and truth. You can worship God anywhere. Well, you certainly can worship God anywhere. But where Jesus has said he is found, he is to be found. If you want to thank him, where he wants to be thanked, it is with his people gathered together. And the whole point of curing you of leprosy is so that you can gather in community. Yeah, what a tragedy, and particularly in our culture, in American society today, so individualistic. The idea that we have the freedom to go it alone. Like, this is the thing the Samaritan lepers and the lepers in general are running away from. Yeah, what Jesus does is he puts people back into community. Leprosy isolates you, and Jesus puts you back in a community, in his community in particular, where again he has said he is to be found with his people. Anyway, so Jesus says, rise and go your way, your faith has made you well. This is something Jesus says to us as well when we gather in that place where we give thanks to him. We don't stay there forever. Well, folks, there's a revival going on as I record this in Kentucky, where at a college they have a worship service. It's over a week long and continuing. Although, no one, I don't believe, has been there the entire time. The idea is at the end of the worship service, you do go back out, rise. Your faith has made you well. This is what a great benediction. Maybe some Sunday I ought to end church this way in the worship service. Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well. Faith in Jesus is what makes us well. And receiving his grace means that we are no longer exiles. We are no longer isolated. We are no longer, in God's eyes, contaminated by our sin, but rather we are forgiven and righteous and pure in Jesus. All right. What does the story tell us about God and his tender mercies? He forgives. He gives grace. When we ask him for mercy, he gives us mercy. He restores us to the community, to his community. What does the story tell us about who we are as God's people and our identity in Christ? We are not Samaritans. We are not lepers. We are not first and foremost citizens of this world, of this nation, of this community. We are not defined by our abilities or our disabilities. Rather, we are defined by our relationship to God through Christ. This is who we are. We are cleansed. We are pure in God's eyes. And we are now part of his community. And what's the application? How now shall we live as God's people in this world? How do we reveal the light of Christ? Well, we seek to be welcoming to others. We seek to show mercy to others, especially those who may be feeling isolated or lonely or in need of care, as lepers certainly would have been. And then we also show our thanksgiving. And we show our thanksgiving by seeking God where God says he can be found, with his people in worship, gathered around his word and sacrament. So that's all for this week. May God bless your lessons.